Nothing is scheduled, nothing is due. By any reasonable measure, you have a few hours that belong entirely to you. And within minutes, sometimes seconds, the discomfort arrives. Not boredom exactly, something sharper. A low level unease that starts to sound like a voice. You should be doing something. You're wasting time. Someone somewhere is being productive right now. What are you contributing? You haven't done anything wrong. You haven't failed at anything. You simply stopped moving, and your nervous system treated it like an emergency. This isn't a personal failing, it's the predictable outcome of a belief system so thoroughly absorbed that most people can't distinguish it from their own values. Today, we're going to name it and question whether it deserves the authority it's been given, the weight you didn't choose to carry. There is a concept in psychology sometimes called the productivity shadow, the persistent background sense that your value as a person is directly proportional to what you produced today. Under this framework, a good day is a day with a completed list. A bad day is a day that didn't yield measurable output. Rest isn't restoration, it's overhead. Something to be minimized, justified, scheduled in careful doses, and ideally converted into recovery for more work. What makes this so difficult to examine is that it doesn't feel like an external imposition. It feels like common sense, like ambition, like the reasonable response to a world that rewards output. But trace it back far enough and you find something worth questioning. The idea that human beings are primarily valuable for what they produce is not a timeless truth. It's a relatively recent cultural inheritance, one that arrived with industrialization, accelerated with digital connectivity, and has now been so completely internalized that many people experience genuine shame at the thought of an unscheduled afternoon. We absorbed a factory's relationship to time and we applied it to ourselves, how the machine got inside. The Industrial Revolution required a specific kind of human being, one whose time could be parceled into productive units, whose output could be measured, whose value could be calculated per hour. That framework made a certain kind of economic sense in a factory. What it has done in the 2 centuries since is migrate from the workplace into the psyche. In 2026, the colonization is nearly complete. Hobbies are potential side hustles. Rest is self-optimization. Weekends are recharge periods. Even sleep is now discussed in terms of its productivity benefits, how it improves focus, extends lifespan, increases cognitive output. We have found a way to make unconsciousness useful. The language of personal development has adopted this framework entirely. Upgrade your mindset, optimize your morning routine, maximize your potential, build your personal brand. The implicit premise in all of it is that you are a system to be improved hardware running inefficient software that needs to be updated. But hardware doesn't have a soul, and optimization, taken far enough, produces people who are highly efficient at doing things and quietly hollow inside, the busyness that protects us from ourselves. Here is something worth sitting with. For many people, the relentless accumulation of tasks, the full calendar, the unread messages, the constant low-level overwhelm is not just a consequence of a demanding life. It is a function. It serves a specific psychological purpose. When you are busy, you are not required to be still. And stillness, for many people, is where the questions live. Is this the life I actually wanted? Do I like who I've become? What would I do if I stopped performing for everyone watching? Busyness is a remarkably effective way to avoid those questions. Not consciously, most people who are chronically overextended aren't choosing avoidance deliberately, but the effect is the same. The noise of constant activity drowns out the silence in which those questions would otherwise become audible, and we have built a culture that validates this perfectly. Being overwhelmed has become a status signal. Saying, "I'm so busy," communicates importance, relevance, demand. Saying, "I had a quiet week," communicates something closer to irrelevance. The social reward system is rigged toward exhaustion and we respond to incentives, what the resistance to rest is actually costing. There is a deep irony embedded in productivity culture that rarely gets named directly. The cognitive processes most associated with creative and strategic output, the ability to make unexpected connections, to generate original ideas, to solve problems that don't have obvious solutions, are not produced by sustained, pressured effort. They emerge during periods of unfocused thought, during walks, showers, aimless moments, during precisely the kind of unstructured time that the productivity framework treats as waste. The research on this is not ambiguous. Default mode network activity, the brain's resting state, is associated with insight, creativity, and long-range planning. When we eliminate rest, we eliminate the conditions under which the most valuable thinking occurs. We are, in the most literal neurological sense, making ourselves less capable by refusing to stop. And then there is the body's response to sustained rest resistance. The nervous system does not negotiate indefinitely. It signals, it warns, it escalates through disrupted sleep, through a growing inability to concentrate, through a fatigue that doesn't respond to weekends. And if those signals are consistently overridden, it eventually stops signaling and simply shuts down. Burnout is not a failure of discipline. It is the body enforcing the rest that the mind refused to take, what it would mean to actually stop. Here is a reframe worth considering. Rest is not recovery time for more work. That framing keeps rest permanently subordinate to productivity, a means to an end, justified only by what it enables next. What if rest were the point, not as a philosophical abstraction, but as a practical proposition? What if an afternoon of doing genuinely nothing was not a reward you had to earn through sufficient prior output, but simply a legitimate way to be alive? The discomfort that arises when you try to inhabit that idea is real. It won't disappear immediately through intention alone. The shame of stillness has been conditioned over years, sometimes decades, and it tends to leave gradually, not all at once. But there is a practice available. Sit with the unease. Don't resolve it immediately by finding something to do. Let the restlessness arrive, note it, and stay still anyway. Not forever, just for long enough that the nervous system receives evidence that nothing catastrophic happens when you stop producing. You are learning through repetition that your worth was not contingent on your output in the first place. A different measure. The metrics we currently use for a good life achievement, output, efficiency, acquisition are not neutral, they were chosen by a specific historical moment with specific economic interests that has now become invisible because it became universal. You are allowed to choose different metrics, presence, genuine connection, the experience of a conversation that had nowhere to be. The afternoon that produced nothing except the quiet satisfaction of having been in it. These are not small things. They are, for many people, the things they will wish they had more of. Not a longer resume, not a more optimized morning, not one more completed list. Just more time that belonged to them, spent in ways that felt like living rather than performing.